Hey everybody, it's Matt from Armchair Handicapping, and welcome to my new show called Press the Pace. Today we'll be looking at kind of a how-to on using my charts, as well as a few bankroll builders to help right before Breeders' Cup weekend. Big weekend ahead. So let's dive into it. Real quick, I will start with running through some of these figures that can be found on my charts, as well as looking at the graphs below. So essentially, for those that are familiar with my older charts, this top portion is majority from that old chart system that I used to have. However, I've added a few new figures here and there. So just running through it real briefly, in this orange section is a lot of today's information like horse name, jockey, trainer, today's race conditions, claiming 16,000, as well as morning line odds and running styles for both Briss, Net, and some of the run styles that I've developed. Moving to the right, in this red section, includes both the model tiering system, which tiers these horses based solely off model calculations, and then the ever so important ACH ratings. And these ACH ratings are essentially a cumulative rating that look at a number of different algorithms in my model, including model rank, power rank, pace rank, as well as a few more that aren't listed, and gives you one figure to give you an idea of which horses have the best odds based off my model calcs, pace projection, sector velocity, etc. And these are what I use to create my model lean cards, which are the one-page summaries that a lot of you are familiar with. Moving to the right, this yellow section is the performance and power figure section. Today's level is the race level for today's race and the field that is present. And then the race level rating for each horse is a look at the past races that this horse has ran in, gives it a kind of grading depending on that field, and the performance level uses this race level and basically grades how the horse ran compared to the race level. So obviously, higher the performance level compared to the race level, the better that horse performed in its races. And the bigger the delta is also significant, because that just means he outperformed that race by that much more. Moving to the right is this blue section, and this is the pace projection section, which matches with this left chart here. And as you can tell, this 7 is a pretty big standout when it comes to pace. However, late pace, that 5 stands out pretty well, but we'll get into that a little bit more. And the green section and the green chart are the sector velocity figures. And this is looking at a horse's past race and essentially giving an analysis of each race that it's ran, and divides those races up into 3 sectors. And then it'll look at velocity for each sector that meet certain criteria that match today's race conditions. And this kind of what I'm trying to do here is create a checks and balances system. So what I do is I will use these sector velocities to essentially validate or give more weight to these pace figures. For example, this 7 in sector 1 has a relatively high velocity compared to the rest of the field, almost a 1 unit delta, which is pretty significant if you think about it. And we look over here at the pace figures, and you see that 7 is clearly above not only the par for today's race, the pace pars, as well as the rest of the field E1 and E2 pace ratings. So that 7 to me is is going to get out there and try to get the early lead. With the, as you can tell, this one is going to be up there as well. So let's dive into this race a little bit deeper. Jumping back up to the pace section, we'll look to see where this show gets its name. It's the press the pace section right here. And this section right here, it's on a rating scale essentially from 0 to 8. And 8, you'd rarely see these 8s, but 5.2 for an 8 furlong race is essentially saying that press or that pace to first call is going to be relatively fast. And you can kind of see this with this velocity is all these horses have pretty high first sector velocity and tend to die out in a second sector and third sector. So this just says that, yes, they're going to be using a lot of gas up here. This 5, however, to me, shows that, hey, I'm not going to be the quickest to get out the gate, but come second call, I'm really going to be starting to make my move. And then moving into sector 3, I mean, that gap, almost 3 units here, is very significant. And jumping over to the pace chart, you can kind of validate that as well with this this pace projection. You got the 5 pretty well behind in pace, first and second call, but that delta between second call and late pace is very significant, and the only horse above pace par. One thing to note though is this 7. If it gets out to an early lead and doesn't get pressed by the 1, the 3, maybe the 2, it has solid stamina, like I was talking about with this combined rating. 160 in the 7. So it could conserve, not run as quick and as pacely, if that's a word, to first and second call, conserve some gas, and then better maintain this pace to where it could fend off this 5. So if you look at it in the velocity chart, what I try to do sometimes, if I think a horse is going to have an early lead and an easy lead, I'll try to pivot on this middle dot, essentially. So if this 7 runs a little bit slower in first sector, we'll conserve more gas into second sector to here, and then this will be a little bit more as well. So you can kind of use these lines as tools to project velocity if you wanted to. But just a reminder, this is a historical view on velocities that this horse has both ran and faced. So it's, like I said earlier, it is a checks and balances. You use velocity to validate pace. Pace makes the race. All right, so that last race we were looking at didn't have much value. It was just a very good example of how to use these charts and how to read these charts with some pretty standout examples. So we'll get into the first, what I'm going to call bankroll builder race. And it's the 8th race on Churchill Downs Thursday card. First thing to do, review that race level. So today's 78.1, pretty high when looking at the performance levels and race levels of the other horses. First thing that stands out to me are the values for the 3 and the 7. Both race levels are in the 60s. Both performance levels are in the 60s. However, that 3 is obviously higher than the race level at 7, a delta of 7. So to me, that's a big standout when just quickly judging these horses and their competitiveness. And looking over here at these ACH ratings, The 3, it's my A2 denotation, as well as a 3.2 ACH rating compared to the A1 of a 2.9. Anytime you see a delta of 1 in the ACH ratings, I would consider that pretty significant. So this 0.3, not very significant. One thing I like to do as well is jump over to the run styles. So this one pretty much has all the run styles besides one that I've developed. So I'll quickly hit these real quick since I didn't on the last. But WW is wire to wire. FR is front runner. And the one not shown, sorry, is actually behind wire to wire, and it's LP, which stands for lead press. So that essentially, wire to wire is pretty straightforward. LP stands for lead press, which means that it is going to be very close to the lead, maybe a few paces off, but nothing more than probably 2 lengths. The FR is the front runner, and this one is a little bit more lenient when it comes to where this horse likes to run. It could be up on the pace, it could be as far back as maybe 3 lengths, but it does like to be up there near the front for second call. And then C is closer. That's just pretty straightforward. It's closing horse, late speed. And then you'll see RTP and SPP, which stands for route presser and sprint presser. And essentially, these are the horses that kind of like to sit in what I call the kitchen or the second group behind the leading pack and the pace setters. And these horses really like to make moves towards second call during the stretch and especially off the turn. So jumping back to this race, as I mentioned earlier, that 3 is a standout in the performance level, being pretty much besides that 7 leaps above the others. So looking at the A1, I don't really like the race level and performance level. And granted, I have not looked at the past performances here, so that's always my second step after looking at these charts, is just to trust but verify and confirm in the past performances. But jumping to the 7 or to the 9, sorry, I really don't like those pace levels and the performance levels. Just tells me it kind of ran at the level it needed to. However, I mean, it does get that A1 rating, so let's look at everything and see why it got that A1 rating. So to do that, let's look at the charts. The 9 is well above pace pars in the first call, dips below in second call, and back up in third call. So this horse, I really don't see it on the lead, especially being in the 9th post. It's going to have some trouble with some traffic on the inside. But the front runner designation for its run style means that it can run a little bit back behind and still make that late move, which showing this LP is significantly above pace pars, means that I think it's going to be kind of a 2-break horse. It's going to break out for an early jump into the first call, kind of settle in towards the second call, and then make another move later in the race. And you can kind of validate this, like I was talking about earlier with velocity. You see a relatively high velocity for first sector, really drops off into second sector, and kind of makes its way back up to middle of the pack for third sector. So just a horse to keep an eye on. I don't really like it. Like I was saying, that 3 is a big standout to me. The reason, because it's a standout, doesn't have the best pace figures compared to the rest of the field, first and second call. However, this constant between, or I should say, relatively constant line between the first sector and second sector for velocity means that this horse is a grinder. It can get up to its top velocity and still hold that velocity and maintain that velocity. And I can double check that up here with the combined rating as well. 181, which third best in the field. So the stamina is there. It just comes down to pace scenario after that. So let's look at a few of these other horses. 2 Horse is a big standout in the pace. The kicker here, though, is this velocity line. Doesn't make me nervous, but I don't like to see constant and pretty drastic drop in velocity. To me, at 8 furlongs, I want to see something more in line with this 3, and really even this 5, because that 5 starts up pretty high as well, but still maintains a relatively high velocity compared to the 2, with almost a 2-unit delta there. So I really think this 2 is going to use a lot of gas to get up front early and then wear down. And you can kind of see that with the pace figures as well, with the LP being well below, almost dead last in the field. So this 3 is a big standout to me. Another one I want to look at, I always focus on second call pace figures in routes. That's 7. Let's dive into that 7. Like I was talking about earlier, it is second highest in race level and performance level. And model calculations don't give it the best rating. See, we got a 6.7. It's second to last in the field for my ACH rating. However, this is where pace can make the race sometimes. I expect the 7 to be out there pretty early, both high sector 1 velocity, high E1 pace, high E2 pace, middle of the pack velocity, and then sector 3 velocity off the table. So this 2 and this 7 are, I think, going to run pretty identical races here. The 7, just because of the performance level, has a bit more experience than this 2. So I think the 7 might outlast the 2 just a tad bit longer. But if it does, it's going to be using more gas just to keep up with this 2. Because if you validate the 2 and the 7, this 2 pace figure seen higher velocity means more to me than the pace figures for the 7 at a slightly lower velocity. So I really think the 2 and the 7 will help the 3 with the pace scenario here, trying to get a quick pace up front for that 3 to come off of. So this 3 right here is my bet for this 8th race on Thursday at Churchill Downs. All right, the next race we're going to look at is the 10th race on Thursday at Churchill Downs. Just looking at the ACH ratings real quick, this 3 at a 1.6 compared to next best 2.9. That's a green flag to me, but it makes me want to double check, validate, like I said, trust but verify. So let's dive into this race. First thing to do, look at today's level, 36.5. Not many. So as you can tell, some of the data is missing here. Maiden race. Maiden races suck. Less data, more skewy. So with that being said, let's take a look at race levels for the non-first time starters. Right now, you can see that the ones that have ran at stronger levels didn't really run up to par. You can see the 27 to 22, 26 to 21, 28 to 24. Not very good. The only one that is outperforming its race level is the 9. So, with that being said, one thing to note on these maiden races are the performance level for first-time starters is a projection of how the horse has been training, and it also kind of looks at some connections. So it also looks at trainer stats, jockey stats, and kind of gives it a general idea of where this horse may fit in the crowd. And it's really tough to give these first time starters performance levels. So you kind of have to look at these performance levels separate to the rest of the field. With that being said, first time starter between the 1, the 6, and the 8, and the 12. 6 has the best performance level projection for today. Not saying that it's going to run a 20.2 compared to this 36.5, because remember, these performance level ratings build off of the race level. So this 20 essentially is building off of nothing. And a good way to validate that is with the workout ratings that I talked about earlier. These are looking at the past few workouts, looks at pattern, distance, time, conditions, as well as if a race falls within a certain window, it'll take some calculations from that race and build it into this workout rating. So jumping back to that 6 with a 20.2 first-time starter performance level, you can kind of validate that here with a 9.2 workout rating, third best in the field. So this horse is definitely one to watch out, and especially with the connections. Jordan Blair, solid trainer. Joseph Talamo, solid jockey. So let's validate this 6 on the velocity. That's one thing about the first-time starters. They won't have pace figure lines, but they will have sector velocity lines. So let's find that 6. And the 6 isn't on here. So sometimes, as you can tell, gotta zoom in a little. You can see the 6 hidden back there a little. So as you follow that line, oh, that's the 2. Where's the 6? All right. I think it's behind there. Yeah. So the 6 and the 12, both first-time starters, both solid workouts. They have earned very, very similar sector velocity figures. That is one thing to look out for, is if you cannot find a horse, be sure to review this chart, because as you can tell, the 6, 57.1, 57.2, 55.3, 55.2, 52.8, 52.8. So sometimes these first-time starters, if they have very similar workout patterns and workout times and stuff like that, they might get very similar ratings. Nothing to be concerned about, just that's how math works out sometimes. So just imagine this 12 line, this green line is also the 6 line. Jumping back to our validation of that 6, we see the 9.2 workout rating. Keep in mind that 12 workout rating as well, another key indicator of why they are overlapped. Both of these first-time starters have shown some solid workouts, as well as some solid connections. So both of these first-time starters I would definitely keep an eye on. All right, so looking at the standout in that 3, like we were looking at earlier, the 1.6 compared to the 2.9, in a 6 furlong or a sprint, I always look at the deltas between E1 pace and E2 pace. The par, as you can see in this green dotted line, relatively dying pace. But in a 6 furlong race, that's pretty consistent. But the 3 is a big standout. And so this is where the validation of the velocity figures comes into hand. As you can see, the sector 1 velocity is middle of the pack for the 3. So this pace figure doesn't get as much, but this pace figure and this sector velocity is what makes this 3 a standout. To earn this pace figure, running it at and against this velocity makes this pace figure stand out to me and have much more weight. And even the delta between this pace figure of the 3 and the 2, it still sticks out to me because it's a 6 furlong race. So really, the 3 and this 2 are going to be up there battling each other in this one, but I think this 3 is going to outlast that 2. And that's simply because of the pace compared to the velocity. And I do know that this 2 has a better sector 3 velocity than that 3, but this delta to me doesn't outweigh that delta, and vice versa. I mean, second call is where in sprints the race is almost over. If a solid horse is out on the lead, and I really think this 3 is going to stun them, moving from second call to the finish line. I don't think that horse is going to get caught for Ken McPeak. So that's going to be my other bet for the bankroll builders for Breeders' Cup is this 3 in race 10, taking a shot on that one. Well, those are the only 2 races I'm going to hit on today. The rest aren't really good betting races, in my opinion, based off these charts. So time to dig into the past performances and see if I can see anything else. So if you all have any questions, check out my website. There's a user guide on these charts as well in there, as well as a contact forum to get in touch with me. You can find me on Twitter. My DMs are open. Please reach out with questions. I'm sure you have some. Don't be afraid to ask. It's the only way you can learn how to use these charts and how to read them. It's a decent learning curve, but for the ones that have started to use these charts and have been buying them and using them to bet with, have been hitting very well, and they have gotten me some good feedback, and that's the only way these charts can improve is through feedback from you all. So please reach out. I'm happy to discuss these charts with anybody. Just give me a shout on Twitter, through email, and I happily help out as best I can. And hopefully you hit some good ones and get ready for Breeders' Cup weekend. Thank you all.